One of the most important aspects of the training that we do at the Monastic Academy is training in order to help us to realize our vow. So a vow is a calling, our truth, and it's very common as people enter the training that there's the sense that I will think up my vow. I'll figure out what my vow is, and then I will impose it upon the world so that the world will become a better place. I'll have a sense of what I'm meant to do and what the world is meant to receive from me, and once it receives it, I've done my job and it has improved. And it's a shock for most people to realize that our vow isn't something that's inside of us. Our vow is not something that we find inside of us. And we talk about it a lot, that we'll find the truth within. But within what? You will find the truth within. But the question is, what will you find the truth within? Within what will you find it? And one of the realizations that eventually comes once humility has sufficiently developed is that we find it right within the world. The world tells us what our vow is, tells us what our purpose is, tells us what our calling is, tells us what our dharma is. We receive that information, and that's the world's job. That's what the world does for us. And then there's something that we do for the world, and that is we say yes. We say yes to that. The world tells us, please do this, and we say, okay. So our job is to say yes, and the world's job is to say, hey, you need to experience this and act on that. And we say, okay. And then the world says, actually, make it this. We say, okay. And that that level of humility and acceptance is something which we can call patience. We sometimes translate it as forbearance. Sometimes people even translate it as endurance. But this term patience is, I think, the best choice. As many of you know, I have been greatly influenced by a certain teacher named Harada Roshi, who lives and teaches in Japan. I was with him there for several years. And I have a calligraphy of his in the cabin in which I did a long-term solitary retreat recently. And the title of the calligraphy, the main character in it, the central significance of the calligraphy is the word patience, or nin in Japanese. And he describes it in a brief essay on the topic. He describes the character itself, the Chinese character for patience. And I don't know if any of you know Chinese or Japanese, read and write the Hanzi, the kanji of China, the characters, but that character is comprised at the bottom of the character for heart. There's a character for heart at the bottom of it. Actually, does anyone here happen to read or write in Hanzi? No? Okay, so the heart, well, it's this section is the heart character. And then right here, kind of jutting into it, is the character for sword or dagger. And so the picture that's written about patience is a picture of a heart being pierced by a sword. And that's what we aim for in this practice. We want to get to the point when our hearts are pierced. What is it? What are our hearts pierced by, though? Our hearts are pierced by this moment, by this experience exactly as it is. This moment isn't what we expected, ever. It's not what we wanted, ever. It's always somewhat different from what we expected and wanted. It also isn't all the things we imagined, all the bad things we imagined that we didn't want to have happen. That also isn't this. This moment is free, and something comes to us. Something or other comes to us. And as it comes to us, in order to be sure that our hearts are truly pierced by it, we just have to do one thing. We say, yes. That's all. We say yes. We say, okay. Yes. Whatever it is, this fundamental skill of saying, as Shinzen puts it, yes, as quickly and as loudly as possible, this is the skill that leads us to patience, and that's the skill that leads us to our calling, to our vow. The ability to totally receive this moment, just as it is, whatever it is. Again, to talk about the Monastic Academy, I was just speaking about this the other day there, that one of the best things about living in a monastery is that you spend all of your time with people who you wouldn't have chosen to spend your time with. People come together not because they're friends. Sometimes communities like that are called intentional communities, which I think is absurd because that's the last thing they are. It's absolutely the last thing. They are unintentional communities. You don't spend time with the people you want to spend time with. You don't intend to create something. It just is what it is, and you have to face those people, and you have to face those people facing you, and deal with whatever comes up. Whatever it is, whoever it is, whatever they happen to be saying, whatever they happen to be doing, it becomes our job simply to accept it, to totally accept it, to totally receive it. And with that skill comes love. Comes a love that doesn't depend on liking, a love that doesn't depend on people being the way we want them to be, or even being who we want them to be. Because we have that continuing relationship, that continuing feedback, we start to engage in a new kind of relationship in which every interaction pierces our hearts. Why? Well, because every interaction is not the one we would have chosen. Every time we experience something that we wouldn't have chosen to experience. And when we experience something that we wouldn't have chosen to experience, that's truth. That's the teaching of the Buddha. There was a great Zen master in Japan who actually named Basho, who I had the chance to visit the exact location where he was enlightened. I was on a pilgrimage through Japan, and he built, in order to be sure that he got enlightened, he built a little small hut from the inside without any doors or windows. And he promised that he wouldn't ask anyone to break him out of it until he was enlightened. So there was just a little slit on one side where they put the food in, and a little slit on the other side where his feces drained out, which is just like this little cottage that we live in. And he trained and trained and trained and worked very hard, and in fact did achieve awakening. And after that, he taught. He was an incredible teacher, just an amazing teacher. I was very inspired to actually go to that little cottage and be right there, right where that happened, as I walked through Japan. And his basic teaching was this. He said, all of you have come here in order to learn the teaching of the Buddha. And then something would happen. So, for example, a dog would bark or a child would talk. And he would say, but that dog that you didn't expect to hear is already the complete teaching of the Buddha. And this is his style of teaching. This is his style of teaching what he called the unborn mind. Awareness that is never born, that never comes into being. Because it never gets a chance, because the next thing is already happening. The next thing is already happening, and we can already say yes to that. We can already accept that. We can already, therefore, let go of what happened before. And in letting go of it, letting go of what happened before, we accept an aspect of our experience which we often entirely miss. And that is that whatever is happening right now is gone. Whatever is happening right now is gone. Whatever it is. So we can have a certain feeling, and by the time we've felt it, it's gone. That feeling is gone, and it won't ever come back. That experience is gone forever, and it will never come back. Someone says something to us, we hear their voice. By the time we've heard that, it's gone. And it's gone forever, and it won't ever return. Whatever it is that's happening right now disappears by the time it's happened. It's a quality of what arises. Everything that arises passes away, and each experience we have passes away. And that means that even if something's happening that we don't like, even if something's happening that is uncomfortable for us, good news. By the time you've experienced this thing you don't like, it's gone forever. It's incredible, isn't it? I, as many of you know, had the chance to live and train with Anna King. How many of you know Anna? I think most of us, right? Yeah, so she is someone who has for many years been in constant excruciating pain. And I was talking with her about something that I needed to do that was going to put me in excruciating pain, not for years, but for longer than I'd like, which is what, a second? And it's certainly longer than a second. And I was talking to her about the anticipation or dread of this experience coming. I have to do this thing, and it actually will be terrible. I know it will be, and it has been at other times, and it must be done. And she said something so nice. And she's a person who can say this. She can actually say what I'm about to say. It's one thing to repeat it. It's another thing to be someone who can say it. And she said, just remember that by the time you think, I can't take it anymore, you already have. So you know that thought is wrong. You know it's not true. By the time the thought has happened, it's been disproven. By the time we think, this is the experience I'm having, this is what's happening, it's gone. By the time we think, I can't stand this, we have. And as we accept and accept and accept, receive and receive and receive, a completely different relationship forms between what we call me and what we call the world. The way we usually look at it, as I said, is that we have the sense, I'm going to think up the way things ought to be. The way I'll know that things ought to be that way is that when I think about them being that way, I'll feel better. So I'm going to have thoughts about how things should be. I'll judge the value and, in fact, validity of those thoughts by the feelings that they cause in my body. And if I get good feelings in my body, then I'll do everything I can to make the world be like that thought. So that might have seemed quite complicated, because it is, because we're all crazy. We're in a lot of trouble. We're dangerous in our insanity to ourselves and others. Because this strategy of the idea, I will think up how things should be, I'll judge whether I'm right by how those thoughts make me feel, and then I'll what? I'll risk the future of the world on that procedure. I'll risk my life. I'll interact with others according to that. It's frightening. That style of I have the idea of how things should be, I will impose that idea on the world, and when the world is like that, I have succeeded. That idea of what a vow is lost when we change our direction, our interaction with the world in the way that I'm describing. No longer are we saying initially to the world, no, you're wrong. When you're more like my idea, you'll become right. We shift from that to yes, to simply yes. There's simply yes to whatever it is. Whatever it's going to be, we say yes to it. And when we start saying yes to whatever we perceive, to whatever we experience, to whatever we receive, when we say yes, yes, yes to it, then there's something else that we start saying yes to. We don't only become willing, unconditionally willing to have this experience just as it is, regardless of whether we expected it or wanted it. We also gain the ability to accept what we must do. Now, the person who in this group is most famous for exemplifying this, embodying it, demonstrating it, is Peace Pilgrim. Peace Pilgrim searched for many years for her vow, for her calling, for her purpose, for her life. And she didn't know how to find it. She had lots of ideas. As we do. We have ideas. We think, oh, here's my good idea, and I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to finally be fulfilled. She had that experience as well, until one night she went walking through the night, through the whole night, asking God to help her to find what she should be doing with her life. And again she did what we do. She asked God the question and then looked for an idea. Give me the idea that I should become. Give me the idea that I should make the world become. We do this. This is what she was doing also. We want an idea of who we should be so that we can become that idea. We want an idea of what the world should be so that we can make the world that idea. And once we've transformed ourselves and the world into ideas, that's what we think is success in life. You ask people, have you succeeded? Well, what does it mean to succeed in life? It means that you had an idea of who you should be, what you should do, and then you became that and did that. When you make yourself, your life, the world into your fixed views, we call that success. It's not surprising that we're eliminating life on Earth, that we do things like develop nuclear weapons, because this is an absurd way of moving through life. She expected that from God. She said, God, give me the big idea. Give me the fixed view that I can hold on to that will always be right and never be wrong, that in fact will prove every other view wrong, and that'll make the world the way I want it to be. Come on, God. Get on it. What are you waiting for? And she went through the night, as she had gone through her life, with this confusion, until deep into the night, in the early morning, she did what we all do eventually. We're all given the opportunity to do this eventually, and that is she gave up. She gave up. And she said, I'm willing to experience, to do anything, whatever it is, without reservation. Whatever it is. Without any reservation, I say yes to whatever it is that I need to experience and whatever it is I need to do. The answer is yes. There aren't exceptions, there aren't reservations, there's no negotiating. It's not yes as long as you also. Okay, God, I'll do it as long as you protect me. Nope. It's just yes. If you, then I'll. No. Just yes. Just a pure acceptance without reservation. She emphasizes this. Without reservation. Without any reservation. Absolutely no reservation. And when a person experiences that, it's mysterious to the point that it's hard to talk about, because when you try to talk about it, you can't talk about it. You try to explain this thing that's beyond ideas, but you explain it in words which are just ideas. It's very painful to try to talk about this, but it's worth talking about, because what happens at that moment invariably is an astonishing joy and peace emerges that cannot be understood, and it cannot be possessed. It can't be had. It can't be owned. It can't be mine. She experienced that. And out of that came a journey, a 15-year journey, to the point when she had cultivated that to the point when she could fully live it. And with that came her total realization of her vow. But that realization isn't something that we impose on anything. It's not that we have an idea and then enforce it. It's that we continually, with humility, receive this experience after this experience, after this experience, after this experience, after this experience. And in doing so, we experience what Peace Pilgrim experienced. At first, it's a matter of receiving this moment, just as it is. This perception, and this perception, this perception, this feeling, this feeling, this feeling. We receive it, saying yes, 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 yes. But then out of that comes the awareness that there is something within us that can be expressed in words and thoughts, that's mine, that needs to be lived. And in our language, we might call it conscience. We each have a mysterious something that you could call conscience. And when you say yes to everything, you have to say yes to that also. You have to say yes to what you know is right, to actually doing that thing. You actually have to do it. And that can take courage. It can be difficult to know, here's the right thing to do and I'm going to do it, even though other people will probably think I'm bad. People might be annoyed at me. People might wish I didn't exist. That could happen. People could wish I would just not exist. And this is actually Peace Pilgrim's experience. When she said, okay, I'm going to become a peace pilgrim. I'm going to walk until given shelter and fast until given food. As she put it, she said, every one of her friends, every one of her family members, without exception, was against that. She said she didn't receive a single word of support from anyone in her life. They all said, you're going to get yourself killed. And she said, maybe. I don't know about that. I can't predict the future, but I can do this today. She said yes, completely, even if it got her killed. And there were, as many of you know, times when it almost did get her killed. And she took that as the most wonderful opportunity to find out if she had really said yes. This might actually kill me now. Here it is. I get to find out if I can say yes to it even now. It's easy to say yes to it as long as it's comfortable and everybody thinks you're great. But what about when everybody thinks you're an idiot? And the snowstorm comes and you're freezing to death. At that moment, can you still say yes? So she got excited. Oh, good. Here it is. Oh, here's someone coming to rape me. Wow, here it is. Can I still have faith in God even now? She had that much faith, total, uncompromising willingness to experience and to do exactly what was needed in that moment, without reservation, without resistance, without conflict, without fight. And because of that, as far as I can tell, she had a profound impact on human history. A profound impact on what we think is possible in the modern age. Many of the phrases that she said are common. The basic idea of doing a pilgrimage for a purpose, she invented that. Did you know that? People didn't do that. You went on a pilgrimage to a place, but she came with the idea you can do a pilgrimage for a purpose. And now we think it's normal. I bet a number of people in this room have done that, have gone on a walk for a certain purpose, to make a statement. She was able to change things because she was willing to accept things. And the practice of patience is the practice of directly understanding how it is that a total acceptance of this moment without reservation mysteriously results in a peace, in a joy that doesn't depend on that situation. And when we have that peace and joy, we end up doing things that productively, compassionately, positively change that situation. It's completely mysterious. We set out to accept the situation, not to change it. And we end up changing it, but in ways that we couldn't take credit for. In ways that we couldn't say, well, good news, everybody, I'm here. It's not about that. It's just wonder. There's just wonder that carries us moment by moment, and then people later, because they don't know us that well, say that we're a saint. If they really knew us, then they know that we're not a saint, and we're not a sinner, and we actually didn't notice that we were here at all. We can't be found anywhere, because everything that arises is already gone, including myself. So there's no one here that needs to take credit for anything, because whoever it is that was here is gone already, never to arise again, completely dead and buried forever. So it's not about me, and it's not actually about the world. At this point, there's something happening that's not inside and not outside, because it's too tangible, it's too concrete to be limited to inside, outside, in between, both, or neither. So this practice that we have is the practice of learning how to directly say yes until a joy that doesn't depend on what happens arises. That joy is then cultivated in mysterious ways until it emerges into a compassionate life that's changing the world because it's in harmony with the world. I'd like to finish with a very simple quote from the Buddha. This, to me, is one of his most impressive statements, because it's something that, as I was mentioning before, is something that he was actually able to say. He could actually say this, which is incredible. It's a simple sentence, but to be someone who can say it requires sacrificing, giving up everything without the slightest reservation. He said, "I do not fight with the world. The world fights with me." It's very impressive to be able to actually say that. I do not fight with the world. The world fights with me. Allow yourself to settle into a comfortable posture and energize that posture by aligning it, stretching it up so that your body is straight and tall, but also restful and relaxed. And attend to whatever you're hearing, whatever sounds you hear in the environment around you. Pay attention to them, and each time that you hear anything, say yes. Attempt to say yes even before you know what the sound is. Each sound that you hear, including silence, receive it just as it is. In this way, it naturally becomes your vow. You don't need to force anything. You don't need to wait for anything. Don't need to delay until a different circumstance arises. This circumstance is already your vow. Say yes to it. And if you'd like, shift your awareness to what you feel. Shift your awareness to what you feel. And whatever feeling arises, say yes to it. Say yes. Without the need to force a certain feeling to arise. Without the need to wait for a certain feeling to arise so that we can be happy. We experience a kind of happiness that doesn't depend on how we feel, but depends only on whether we're saying yes to how we feel. We can continually apply this technique. We may have a certain feeling. We try to say yes to it, but we can't. We're too afraid to say yes to that, and so we say yes to the fear. But we're afraid to do that, so we say yes to that fear. But we can't, so we feel ashamed, so we say yes to the shame. And the whole thing starts to seem sort of absurd, so we say yes to the humor. We continually apply it to this next experience. Why? Because everyone here is having a different experience. You can trust the one that's coming to you. If you trust the one that's coming to you, and you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait to be happy. You don't have to wait to do the right thing. You don't have to wait for anything. Rather than waiting, we say yes to this. Naturally, just because you don't have to wait, just because you are at a point when you don't have to wait, doesn't mean that you can't. You can say yes to waiting. You can say yes to everything. Everything that you feel. And you'll find that the more quickly and loudly you say yes to it, the more completely it arises. And the more completely it arises, the more completely it passes away. Very good. In a moment, I'll ring the bell and we'll have the opportunity to trust in this practice. Even as we shift from practice in stillness to practice in motion. For about 5 minutes, we will have the chance to move around, to walk around, to shift our position. And the challenge here is to trust your own conscience. In terms of how to do this. Our conscience doesn't apply in any special way to big things. Everything is equally big. Every action we take is equally important from the perspective of our conscience. So how we walk around the room matters just as much as how we live our lives. Why? Because at that moment, that is how we're living our lives. So practice trusting. Trust your sense. Of how to move through the space. And then after a few minutes, I'll ring the bell again and say yes to that and return to your seat. You may find that it's appropriate to get some water or use the restroom during this time. Again, trust in all that. But most important, continue this technique. Continue to pay attention to how you feel. Say yes to it to the extent that a new kind of awareness arises in terms of how to move. Continue with the technique, accepting, having patience with, enduring, fully receiving whatever feelings are arising in your body. You may feel the chair that you're sitting on, you may feel emotions. You may not feel anything, but you're still feeling nothing. You can feel that. The salient aspect of this practice is the unconditional nature of this patience, allowing every experience to penetrate our hearts. Perhaps we feel that this is working, that we're practicing very skillfully. If so, say yes to that. Feel wonderful, perhaps prideful or excited. Let that experience arise fully. Perhaps we feel frustrated. We feel that we can't do this. It's not working. It's never going to work. I don't work. If so, unconditionally accept that experience. Unconditionally feel that. Say yes to that. And we notice that either way, after some time, that experience is gone. That experience was not ultimately true because it's gone. It was a passing circumstance. And by saying yes to its arising, we said yes to its passing. If we're excited, for example, we say yes to the arising of excitement. And in doing that, in that very act, we have said yes to the end of that experience. If we feel frustrated, for example, we say yes to it. We allow that frustration to arise fully, and in doing so, in that very act, we have said yes to the end of frustration. And now, let's play with this a little bit. Let's use the momentum that we've gathered in order to explore something a bit different. Make an effort, try to figure out the way the world should be, to figure out how you should be. And as you do that, say yes to that effort. Say yes to that trying. Because this is unconditional, isn't it? So we have to even say yes to saying no. So try. Figure out how you should be and how the world should be. Notice the experience of that effort, that manipulation, that grasping, and say yes to it. Try to think up a sentence that describes how you and the world should be. And as you do that, say yes to that effort, to that trying, to that interference, to that conflict between the way you think the world should be and the way it is. between the way you think you should be and the way you are. And say that sentence in your mind, exploring your experience of trying to come up with the right thing. And the experience of saying yes to simply hearing that sentence as if it were any other sound. Say yes both to your effort and to the auditory sensation of that sentence. And notice that the joy and peace that comes from saying yes to your effort to make things better is just the same as the joy and peace that comes from receiving this experience just as it is. It's something that's explored, not acquired. Don't wait. This is already happening. Don't wait. This is already gone. Don't wait. This is already your vow. Mm-hmm.
I'd never realized before what a privileged class of like those ideas of making the world was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very refreshing to feel it as so similar, like undifferentiated from a breeze or
Mm-hmm.
itch.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very good. Did everyone hear that?
Yeah.
Do you want to say it again, or should I? Miles said that he hadn't previously noticed what a privileged class those specific efforts and thoughts are. How he's privileged them. They're special thoughts about how things should be, efforts about getting them to be that way. Hadn't noticed that they got a special treatment. And it was refreshing to not put them in that special category, but to treat them in just the same way. To treat those thoughts and efforts just the same as a breeze or an itch or whatever other experience might be happening. All of it being unconditionally accepted was a new experience that was enlivening and fascinating, and something in which it's possible to more deeply trust. Did I get any of that wrong?
No.
I miss anything?
Added a few things that felt in alignment.
Good. Yes?
So I understand if we get attached to these thoughts and these ideas about how we should be and how the world should be, that can be, unskillful.
Mm-hmm.
As Miles said, we can kind of privilege those thoughts and get lost in these fantasies and these ideas.
Mm-hmm.
On the flip side of that, aren't there certain kind of thoughts, certain efforts that might come from certain types of thoughts that are indeed like more skillful? And so how do we, I guess, strike that balance? And then I'm saying this in part because maybe I misunderstood some of the exercise. So I was kind of recognizing the attachment to some of the thoughts, but there was this kind of motivating force behind thinking about how I should be in the world and how the world should be, especially in the context of the spiritual environment.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. So, let me ask a question back to you. The Buddha was very astute in his description of questions. He said there are 4 kinds of questions. Questions that should be answered directly, such as, are all things impermanent? You should answer that directly, yes. Okay? Questions that should be answered through analysis, yes? So what's the cause of the arising of the senses? Well, you're going to want to analyze that out a little bit, yes? Questions that should be answered through counter questions, and this is an example of that one, and then questions that should not be answered. So let's have some counter questions. In what, it's a bit of a blunt counter question. Given the exercise we just did, how are you asking that question? Meaning, what about what we just did gives rise to that question?
So when you asked us to
Mm-hmm.
think about how we should be and how
Mm-hmm.
how the world should be, what came to mind is that I should be, or I put it in like a
Mm-hmm.
positive affirmation. Like I said,
Mm-hmm.
I am, I'm open to receiving my inner experience and that
Mm-hmm.
of the world with curiosity and love.
Mm-hmm.
That was what came to me. So I
Mm-hmm.
started repeating that.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing that, and then really felt good.
Mm-hmm.
A mantra of
Mm-hmm.
sorts. And also those types of, mantras can then lead to skillful action.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I can become attached to that idea and kind of living this fantasy of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh wow, if I figured it out, if I just like stick to this mantra, like I'm done, I'm on my way to enlightenment, like, I'll walk out in the Quaker house. But on the flip side of that,
Mm-hmm.
those types of thoughts, those categories of thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not to privilege them, but they can be more, they can give rise to skillful action.
Mm-hmm.
If we recognize them for what they are.
So, absolutely, I agree with all of that. And why are you asking that?
Why am I asking that?
It seems that we just did that, right?
Yeah.
That the exercise was to start noticing those thoughts and then say yes to them,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
So, why are you asking that?
I'm asking that
Yeah.
because it made me think about my attachment to these thoughts when Miles brought up that certain thoughts, certain ideas are privileged, but they're still just thoughts and ideas.
Mm-hmm. Which is true, right?
Yeah, we intend to, yes, that's
True.
Yes.
And then you're also saying you can privilege those thoughts, and that has benefit. And that's true,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
So, yes, and yes.
Okay. That's helpful. I think my initial question was about kind of delineating between when it's skillful and not skillful.
Good, we can talk about that. I'd be happy to talk about that. But it's important to it's important to notice that in the exercise itself, that we did that on purpose. We intentionally brought up positive things and wanted to privilege them.
Okay, that's
Right?
that's helpful.
Didn't we do that?
We did.
You
but
said try
I
to.
thought
Yep.
I might have misunderstanding the exercise. That's why I was.
Well, it's tricky because in an exercise like this, we expect that in order to say yes to one thing, we have to say no to another thing. That's the way that we typically operate. So if we say yes to being non-judgmental, right? Well, that means that we shouldn't be judgmental, right? But that's absurd. To say you shouldn't be judgmental is judgmental, right? It's a judgment. You shouldn't be judgmental. Hey, you shouldn't be judgmental. You can't say that without being a hypocrite, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in the same way, you're giving rise to an awareness that says yes to everything. But we subtly think, well, okay, then I have to say no to saying no to bad things. Yes, I have to say, I shouldn't say no. I shouldn't privilege certain thoughts. Yes? But in fact, the way we did the exercise at the very end, it was made clear, no, you can do that. You can say yes to saying no. You can say yes to effort. You can say yes to privileging these thoughts. You can do that. Feel free to do that. Allow yourself to do that. And this part is, as you're bringing up, which is why I asked you the question so many times, because it's a good question to ask carefully. Why, given that that was the actual exercise that we actually did, is it still confusing? Do we still have the sense that there's a conflict there? This is worth looking at very closely. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Because it's not just that you're wrong. Don't think that it's so easily answered. If it was so easily answered, it wouldn't have needed to be asked several times. It's actually a very significant question. Why is it that we remain subtly confused about this? Now, you were correct, brave, and compassionate to turn it from something subtle, implied, and something explicit and obvious so that we can take a look at it. With your question, you did that. But I wanted to do that even more by asking, why do we still have the impression? The exercise actually was bring up certain thoughts and efforts and allow them to flourish. Say yes to them. That may mean giving your life over to them, right? That's another way, or even more accurately, it's the same way of saying yes. Right? So then we come up with what is in fact a totally different question. And that is, how do you know which thoughts and efforts to privilege? That's a hard question, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
You see how that's the question and how it's surprisingly tricky to answer? The normal way we answer it is don't answer it. Just keep on staying stuck on whatever we picked up along the way. And everyone else is wrong. Right? That's our normal way. And this path is an escape from that. So there are two answers. Okay? There's the conditional answer and the unconditional answer. The conditional answer needs to come first. Did you understand what I just said, or should I say it again?
I understand.
Okay.
Two answers, conditional, non-conditional. Conditional comes first.
Well said. So, the conditional answer is thoughts and efforts that are in harmony with, carriers of, composed of, motivated by letting go, compassion, and kindness are good and you should privilege them. Thoughts and efforts that are based on, comprised of, motivated by selfishness, hatred, or how do you translate this? Usually it's translated as cruelty. But a sense of either I want to hurt you or I don't really care if you get hurt. That See how that's cruel? There's a cruelty to it. Those should not be privileged. Okay? So that's the first answer. And when I started this training, I didn't like that answer. I wanted the other answer. I wanted an unconditional answer because that feels so pasted together. Oh, you just came up with that. Come on. Give me the real answer. Right? But as time's gone on, I've appreciated that answer more and more. It's a very good answer. And it's one that we should deeply respect. Okay? So those three qualities, that's how you distinguish. If you have thoughts, if your thoughts and efforts are made up of and based on letting go, relinquishment, dropping what I'm holding for my own, which you could refer to in a certain way as what we talked about last week, generosity. Yes? Generosity is a form of relinquishment, so we could call it generosity. Compassion, specific concern for the difficulties that people, including ourselves, are going through, the desire to help people to overcome those, and a very general sense of kindness. Very general. Not that I'm going to solve your problem for you, even for myself. That's what compassion is. The sense that I will solve this problem, I will help you to solve this problem, or help me to solve my problem. We're going to do something about this, right? This kindness is much more subtle and enveloping. If those three, if one or more of those three are primary in a thought or effort, then you should privilege that thought and effort. And if they're opposites, selfishness, grasping, trying to possess more and more, and then again the other two align, even though it's a little bit in English. Actually, I don't think we have quite those words in terms of negative emotions, negative intentions, but the sense of I want to cause you this specific form of pain, even if it's for ourselves. And then the other, just a general sense of I don't like you or I don't care about you. It's a very general blanket sense, not a specific targeted sense. If those three are there, then don't give privilege to that. Okay, good. But we have to ask the question. It's reasonable to ask the question. Well, let's say that that's right. I'll trust you on that, Mr. Buddha, that's how you can tell the difference. Okay, but a further question, how do you know? How did you come up with that answer? Shouldn't I be able to come up with that answer too? Shouldn't I be able to validate this? In fact, shouldn't it be possible to confirm that here and now? Shouldn't it, huh? And his answer is absolutely, definitely. That's the definition of the Dharma. It is verifiable here and now. That's one of the ways he defined the Dharma. His teaching, he said, is verifiable here and now. If it isn't verifiable here and now, it's not the Dharma. Yes? So there must be some way to do it, and that's the absolute answer. Okay? The way that that's done is by totally releasing all of the accumulated assumptions we have about the answer to that question. Because anything that we're holding on to regarding the answer to that question is confusing our perception of that answer. And so, but what is the question? The question is a huge question. How do you know the difference between good and bad? What is wisdom? What is love? This is the question that you're asking. It's that deep. And so the answer is clear if we aren't making it up. In other words, reality is already apparent if we're not involved in what we're making up. Okay? The truth is what's there when you stop lying. You understand? Lies have to be produced. The truth doesn't. So if you're not effortfully creating lies, that's already the truth. Okay? As they say in Zen, don't seek truth, just lose opinions. Right? Just get rid of your opinions, and then the truth is what's left. Because lies are what happen when you manipulate the truth. If you don't manipulate the truth, it's already the truth. You don't have to make it into the truth. If you have to make it into the truth, that's a lie. Okay? And in fact, the idea that you have to make the truth into the truth is also a lie. So what do? You stop lying. What is it to stop lying? It's stop holding on to any assumptions or preferences you have regarding the answer to that question. And with that, the question is already fully answered. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I guess the like one approach is just to go out, someone asks me this question when I'm walking back home, and I just repeat what you said to me.
Exactly.
But the other is the actual lived experience of it that comes through practice of the Dharma.
Exactly.
So if we have that, well, our answer might be worded slightly differently, but it's coming from that place of deep wisdom and experience.
Exactly. It will definitely be worded differently.
Yeah.
Unless it's worded the same, of course. You're allowed to word it exactly the same, and you're allowed to word it totally differently. And either way, it's it. It's what it is. Does that answer your question? Good.
Thank
you. Yes.
When I was saying yes to what I was feeling, a lot of what I was feeling was drowsiness, and
Yeah.
I didn't know how to say yes to it without falling asleep.
Mm-hmm.
And when you asked us to think about how the world should be and how we should be in the world, my mind wouldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I said yes to my mind not doing it. And then that made me feel even more drowsy.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to say yes to drowsiness without falling asleep.
Good. So I think that there are two questions, right? I think there are two questions here, which again are not closely related, which is fine. Shinzen often says that one of the main jobs of a teacher is to hear a question and then hear all the questions that make up that question, and also to know that some of them may be related and some of them actually may not be related, either because we are just experiencing two different things at the same time and so they seem like the same thing, so we make them into one question, or because we just want to ask two questions and so we try to get away with it by combining them.
And when you said that, I realized I didn't even ask a question. I just made a statement.
That's true.
I said what I didn't know how to do, and the reason I said
Yeah.
that is because I don't know what my question is.
Good. Well, then that's, I suppose, also a teacher's job. It's also a teacher's job, as many of you have noticed, to know when a question isn't being asked. Yes? It's very common during retreats that someone in the Q&A period will speak, and I'll say something like, "What's your question?" And then they'll speak again, and I'll say, "I'm not hearing a question." And they'll speak again. I say, "Still no question." Next. So that's common also. But I think you have two questions, and you can tell me if this resonates. One question is, how do you say yes to drowsiness without falling asleep? Which is a good question and very useful, and I think it got some support from around the room. The other question is, what do you do if your mind won't do the exercise, think up the way the world should be and how you should be in it. Okay, that one, that's the easy one to answer. So let me answer that one first. You did it. Did you notice? You decided, well, then I just won't do this. I can't do it, so I won't. But note, that was your idea of how the world should be and how you should be in it. Right? You yourself thought up, oh, I know, I shouldn't do this exercise. Got it. That's my idea of how I should behave in the world right now. And then you did it. Right? So that was easy to answer, I think. Did I get it? Good. Okay. To make it a little easier for you if this happens in the future, just know you don't actually have to get a thought. You just have to make the effort to get a thought. And it's the effort or the thought that you're saying yes to, and or the thought you're saying yes to. But in your case, you also got a very clear thought, which you followed through on immediately, which I respect. Okay. The next question is about drowsiness. Just for a sense of how I should answer this, do you mind if I query the group?
Yes. I mean, no, I don't.
How many people are interested in this question? Just raise your hand. Okay, more than half. Okay, then I'll answer it a little more fully. Because this will have to be the last question. That's why I asked about it. Good. So to say yes to drowsiness means saying yes to experiencing drowsiness. That might not seem like a significant difference in phrasing, but it turns out to be highly significant.
Yeah, that was a really significant thing.
Okay, great. To say yes to drowsiness means saying yes to experiencing drowsiness. Note that when you fall asleep, you're no longer experiencing drowsiness. Right?
Yes.
So stay with the drowsiness by not falling asleep. Well, okay, thanks. How? Right? Isn't that the next question? Thanks. Helpful, but wait, how? There are a few different ways of doing it, but to me anyway, in my experience, the most helpful one is to notice what it is, and now we're getting a little technical. That's why I asked if people are interested. It's going to get just a little bit technical. What is it that's contrary to drowsiness? What is it that's contrary? What's the opposite of drowsiness? What's the antidote? What's the alertness? It's true, it is. But I actually wouldn't put it that way, although I like what you're saying. It is actually alertness. Clarity, alertness, these are excellent. I just wouldn't put it that way. I'd put it slightly differently because this is a bit technical now. Which means that we start losing pure truth for the sake of practicality. So your answers are true and accurate, but when we have to work with this, we need to be practical about things. So the word I would use is fascination, interest, curiosity. That's how I would put it, and of those, my favorite is fascination. So when you're fascinated with something, you're not drowsy. And therefore, you're alert and aware of it. Okay? So in a certain way, you might think that boredom and fascination are opposites, whereas alertness and drowsiness are opposites. But from a certain perspective, it's more useful to consider drowsiness and fascination to be these opposing pairs. Why? Because if you do, then you can actively cultivate fascination. Now, there are two things that we're particularly, 30 seconds. There are two things that we're particularly fascinated by, that human beings tend to be particularly fascinated by. Things that we really like and things that we really hate. Those things really get us going, right? So you need to look in the drowsiness for things that you really like and really hate. Okay? Good. So let's, in remaining no time, let's go over quickly what those things are. 2 of them, just because there's little time. One thing you really like is how good it feels to have waves of relaxation pouring through your body. When you're drowsy and you're doing that nodding, what's really happening is that your body's relaxing involuntarily. You don't even have to try to relax. Sometimes you try to relax, but that doesn't make any sense. How could you try to relax? But here with drowsiness, you don't even have to try to relax. It just happens to you, and it's so nice. Moves all the way through your face and chest, all the way down, sometimes into your legs. And oh, what a relief. Oh, no life. Ah, what a relief. So you get to have those waves of relaxation, and they're very pleasant. And you want to experience them, right? You don't want to lose them. It's so nice to be so drowsy and therefore relaxed. So you're motivated when you're deeply experiencing those waves of relaxation and the pleasure that comes with them to not fall asleep. Because the moment you fall asleep, you lose all that pleasure. And you wouldn't want to do that now, would you? Right? So you turn your attention to a specific aspect of the drowsiness, the relaxation, and that's fascinating. But there's something else that's interesting, and that is this icky, gross, tight, pulling at your face and body of the drowsiness. It's so annoying, and it's tugging at you, and you wish it would go away, but it won't go away. If you turn your attention to that, it will actually typically energize you because it's so annoying. You don't want it. You want to get rid of it, actually. Have a big fight against it. Well, if you're in the middle of having a big fight, you're not falling asleep, right? So fight it. Just attack it. Get mad at it. This pulling at your face. Oh, no, don't pull at my face. Who are you anyway? Get away. So just say, go away. Like that. And it will. It'll go away. It will. And then you're rewarded immediately for that. So you're both pulled into awakeness by wanting to experience the pleasure of the relaxation, and you're pushed into awakeness by pushing against those icky, tugging, annoying sensations through your body, through your face and your body. And then you have all that, and typically you can bring yourself into a point of being fascinated by those 2 things that we love and hate. We become intensely interested in them. And that intense interest then keeps us awake, even if those sensations don't go away. And actually, especially if they don't go away. If they do go away, then you have to find interest elsewhere. Good?
Yes.
All right, sorry to be a little late on that. How long will this one take?
No, just,
Oh, you comment?
no.
Oh.
From that point, how would sleep be achieved?
Sorry, I can't see you.
The drowsiness that we hate, this feeling that we hate.
How would sleep be achieved?
Yeah, once we go.
Oh, yeah.
Now we have this horrible feeling we've been fighting all day.
Yeah.
We're trying to go to sleep and we can't sleep, but we're still drowsy as heck.
So a few answers to that. I'll give you the better answer and then the worse answer, but I like the worse answer better. The better answer is stop doing the technique. Ta-da. The worse answer is don't stop doing the technique. And if you don't need to sleep, don't. Okay? And the thing that's strange about it is that if you keep on doing the technique, it turns out you need less sleep. Yeah. You know, you just need less sleep. So sometimes that sense that I don't need to sleep right now is actually true. But if you don't like that answer, that's okay. Just stop doing the technique. Get tugged by the sensations. Get lured by the relaxation and drop right in. You can do that just as well. Gaining a certain skill doesn't prevent you from gaining the opposite skill. Does that make sense? I can lift my hand up. That doesn't make me less able to put my hand down. So you can do this technique sometimes, but do the opposite technique at other times. You see? You don't have to just keep on doing it, although at least the residents here should maybe explore the never stop doing the technique. And if that means you never sleep again, well, okay, yes. But I'm not saying you should do that. So you should feel free to do the opposite technique. Yes?
Yeah.
All right, we have to stop there, but thank you for adding that.